Joining us now for World Brief and the review of some of the headlines of today's newspapers from around the world is Adefemi Akinsanya. Adefemi, good morning.
Dr. Ruben, I see we've all traveled now. We're all connected from different parts of the world. Good morning to you, Rufai, and Ayo too. I hope you're all doing well. But let's jump straight into it. Thank you. Thank you, definitely. So here's the thing, the biggest story was definitely at long last, Nigeria being represented at the general debate. So slightly earlier than expected, Vice President Kashim Shettima, of course representing the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, Bola Ahmed Tinubu, Vice President Kashim Shettima did deliver Nigeria's remarks. They were strong, they were stable, they were steady remarks, very moving and poignant in parts. And as expected, he talked about Nigeria's need and call for economic justice, for better relevance and a reaffirmation of global institutions and multilateral coming togetherness, essentially. He talked specifically also about debt forgiveness, about sovereign debt forgiveness, talking about how it is hampering the different plugs and parts of Nigeria's economy that it wishes to move forward in. He also talked heavily about the environment, the moves that Nigeria is making, and clearly underscored the importance that the federal government sees in that portion of the country. And then, as expected, he did call for Nigeria to have a permanent seat on the UN Security Council. Let's take a listen to this wrap of the Vice President's comments.
1. Nigeria must have a permanent seat at the UN Security Council. This should take place. This should take place as part of a wider process of institutional reform. 2, we need urgent action to promote sovereign debt relief and access to trade and financing. 3, countries that host minerals must benefit from those minerals. And 4th, the digital divide must close. As our friend, the Secretary General, has said, AI must stand for Africa included. On my first point, the United Nations will recover its relevance only when it reflects the world as it is, not as it was. Nigeria's journey tells this story with clarity. When the UN was founded, we were a colony of 20 million people. Absent from the tables where decisions about our fate were taken. Today, we are a sovereign nation of 236 million people, projected to be the third most populous country in the world. Sovereignty is a covenant of shared responsibility, a recognition that our survival is bound to the survival of others. To live up to this charge, we must work hand in hand with our neighbors and partners. We must follow the trails of weapons, of money, and of people. And for this, Nigeria's soldiers and civilians carry a proud legacy. They have participated in 51 out of 60 United Nations peacekeeping operations since our independence in 1960. We have stood with our partners in Africa to resolve conflicts, and we continue that commitment today through the multinational Joint Task Force. We are despised by terrorists because we choose tolerance over tyranny. Their ambition is to divide us and to poison our humanity with a toxic rhetoric of hate. Please. I join you today to reassert Nigeria's commitment to peace, to development, to unity, to multilateralism, and to the defense of human rights is beyond compromise.
So it was a very strong outing from the Vice President on stage at the General Assembly, but also on the sidelines, because ahead of his comments at the General Assembly, he did participate in an African Union leaders meeting, high-level meeting, that was one on peace and security across the African continent. That high-level meeting was hosted by Angolan President João Lourenço, and of course it was attended by very high-level African politicians, namely the Vice President of Nigeria, Nigeria, Kashim Shettima, who was in the room and delivered very strong remarks. In addition to his presence, there was also Felix Tshisekedi, the president of the Democratic Republic of Congo, a president who knows very well about the importance of security and the push for peace within his own land, especially in the eastern parts of DRC. We saw representatives from Tanzania. President Samia Suluhu was not in attendance herself, but she did send a representative, as did Yoweri Museveni of Uganda and other countries. That being said, we did have the Algerian president in the room. You did have representatives from Ethiopia, and of course the leadership of the African Union itself. It was a very high level, true to its name, conversation, level of participation in there. As I said, the Vice President delivered his remarks, and he talked about how everyone plays a role in making sure that the sanctity of democracy and safety of people on their continent is everyone's responsibility. So when there are challenges such as conflict, there can't be a rush to resolution and then an immediate celebration of that resolution when, as we heard in the room, often these ceasefires and resolutions are broken before the ink is even dry on those papers. So it was very poignant to hear what he had to say. Also inside the room was the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Ambassador Yusuf Tugar, who clearly is the person to talk to when it comes to Nigerian foreign policy and what we can expect going forward. He gave us a bit more context on what happened in that room. Let's take a listen to what the minister had to say.
That was a meeting of the African Union Peace and Security Council, where Nigeria has been elected time and again since inception. So it's consistently there. We play a very significant role in the Peace and Security Council, and it is the position of the African Union to discourage military coups, and where they happen, to encourage a smooth transition back to civil rule. And in terms of Nigeria's position, it is very clear. We abhor military coups, military takeovers. It's unfortunate when they do happen. A lot of the time, it has to do with external interference and exogenous factors. So in our region, we have experienced these coups due to certain failures of external interventions. That was a meeting of the African Union Peace and Security Council, where Nigeria has been elected time and again since inception. So it's consistently there. We play a very significant role in the Peace and Security Council, and it is the position of the African Union to discourage military coups, and where they happen, to encourage a smooth transition back to civil rule. And in terms of
Right, so that was the foreign minister, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Ambassador Yusuf Tugar, who was giving us a bit more information into the background of what we were witness to within that high-level security meeting of African Union leaders in terms of security and peace. So grateful for that. Moving on back to the UN General Assembly itself, one of the biggest names to speak, aside from Nigeria, of course, was that of Volodymyr Zelensky, the Ukrainian president. It was something that many people were tuning into because he was one of the earlier speakers. He did speak in the morning, and ultimately he gave a very bleak outlook for the world. He said that unfortunately institutions are too weak to stop wars, and what he is saying is that it is ultimately weapons that have the ability to decide who lives and who dies. So this is also very strong and stark words coming from a leader who is still trying his hardest to stave off this invasion from Russia, and that clearly has a lot of repercussions for his own legacy within his country and his performance as a leader thereafter. Let's take a listen to what Volodymyr Zelensky had to say just quickly.
If there are no real security guarantees except friends and weapons, and if the world can't respond even to old threats, and if there is no strong platform for international security, will there be any place left on earth that's still safe for people?
So a few things to look forward to, again, as these General Assembly heads of state continue to address. One thing to look forward to is that of the president of Palestine. That is, of course, Mahmoud Abbas. He will be delivering his remarks today, and he'll be doing so virtually. We did discuss how the United States, who clearly is not going to be recognizing a Palestinian statehood, was also unable or unwilling, really, to allow the Palestinian president to have a visa in order to attend the UN General Assembly in person. So we did see earlier on in the week that members of the United Nations did vote for a resolution that would allow Mahmoud Abbas to deliver his remarks virtually. So that is what we are going to be hearing later on today. We did have him appear virtually earlier on in the week, but that was a conversation that was chaired by France and Saudi Arabia. Again, just fueling a bit more support for Gaza, for Palestine, and a two-state solution as soon as possible. We are expecting that many world leaders will continue to recognize Palestinian statehood, and it'll be interesting to hear what Mahmoud Abbas has to say once it's his turn. Going ahead to other countries that will be represented today, will be speaking today, we can expect to hear from Equatorial Guinea, from Ghana, from Sudan. So it is Somalia and Ethiopia also. So it is going to continue to be a quite Africa-heavy day at the General Assembly. Let's move very quickly on to papers before I come to you for any comments. I know we're short on time and we have a lot to get through. Let's take a look at the front page of this day. And just as I've said, this day does lead with Vice President Kashim Shettima's words at the UN General Assembly. He did call for a permanent Nigerian seat on the Security Council, and this day's front page continues to list sovereign debt relief, resource benefits, and the reiteration of Nigeria's support for a two-state solution as a way out of this Israel-Palestine crisis, also mentioned among the highlights on the paper. To the New Telegraph this morning, let's have a look at that. We're saying that after a 30-year hiatus, President Tinubu has formally announced support for the resumption of oil production in Ogoniland. He's instructed the National Security Advisor to open engagements between Ogoni communities and the NNPCL, as well as other stakeholders, to finalize how operations will resume. Still with the punch, staying with oil, we do see that the NNPCL has secured 318 billion naira to fund a new oil explorations in connection to that story. The Guardian of Nigeria does lead with political tint essentially this morning, as there are disputes over the multiple dormant political parties, and that's as INEC considers adding 14 more. Meanwhile, the Daily Trust has a crackdown on the federal government in terms of the federal government directing all ministries, departments, agencies, including military, paramilitary, public and private ones, to begin mandatory verification of academic credentials of existing staff and new hires starting the 6th of October 2025. The goal here is to make sure that there's a centralized digital system for storing, managing, preserving and verifying educational records and certificates. And very quickly to the UK Metro, we see the London Mayor, Sadiq Khan, has fired back at recent attacks from Donald Trump, but this time with a touch of humour. Now, if you remember, during his speech at the General Assembly, Donald Trump did call Sadiq Khan a terrible mayor and claimed that London was sliding towards Sharia law. Now, in response, Khan called the remarks appalling and bigoted, but he also didn't stop at anger. He did go on to joke and say that it seems as though he was living rent-free in Donald Trump's head, and said that, hey, I think Donald Trump might have a crush on me. So those are your papers. I'd love to hear your thoughts specifically, of course, on the General Assembly, what Kashim Shettima had to say, and we'll take it from there.
Hello.